Hi everyone, and welcome to our Wildlife Wednesday monthly roundup for March of 2021. I'm your host, Tenley Thompson, and we've got some amazing wildlife videos to show you from all over the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Let's dig right in with Laura and Tyler talking about some footage we shot last week of wolves testing elk.
Hello everyone, my name is Tyler Greenlee and I am a wildlife guide at Jackson Hole Eco Tour Adventures. Earlier this week, I had the opportunity of filming wolves hunting 2 bull elk. 3 black wolves can be seen in the video traversing the hillside, heading towards 2 bull elk, and we actually got to see some pretty cool action of these wolves actually play bowing and jumping around, testing these elk, seeing if it is worth the energy to hunt these individuals. Elk are the most abundant herbivore in the ecosystem, and in Yellowstone, they make up about 95% of the wolves' winter diet. And so they are a very important food source for wolves out here.
I also want to give a shout out and a big thanks to Laura, another guide here at Jackson Hole Eco Tour Adventures. And this sighting would not have happened without her help finding and spotting the wolves. Thank you, Laura, for letting us use some of your footage in this video.
Studies from Yellowstone National Park have shown that during severe winters and later in the winter, such as in February and March, wolves do tend to target older male elk. And that's because these are the weakest members of the herd at this time of year. That's because bull elk spend a lot of their energy during the rut courting females, and so they tend to be the weaker targets in the winter, which is surprising because you would think the females are smaller, they would be the easier targets, but that's not true. Elk are also fairly unique among deer because they keep their antlers longer throughout the winter, and we think that there is a possible correlation between elk keeping their antlers later on in the year and wolf predation. A lot of deer species like moose and mule deer lose their antlers earlier in the winter and lose an extra form of protection, an extra weapon that they could use against wolves. However, because elk are predated so heavily upon by wolves, it is thought that elk possibly adapted to keep their antlers longer throughout the winter as an extra defense against wolves. And studies out of Yellowstone National Park have actually shown that wolves select bull elk that have lost their antlers earlier than bulls that still have their antlers, meaning they are selecting potentially weaker targets, animals that no longer use their antlers or have their antlers to defend themselves against these predators. Now, in the video, you can see the wolves are actually testing the elk. They're play bowing, trying to get the elk to chase them, testing their strength. You can see they are focusing their attentions largely on the smaller individual of the 2 bull elk. And what these wolves are doing is they're trying to select the weakest member, the easiest target, to actually see if it's worth taking down. And they are play bowing, they are testing the bull elk, seeing which animal is the weakest. I do think that this is very playful behavior and that these wolves aren't being super serious about hunting these elk. Now, if one of these elk potentially had a limp or showed some sign of illness or weakness or perhaps starvation, the wolves might have pressed their attack, pressured the elk a lot more than they did in the video. When the 3rd wolf approached, you can see it seems to be more nonchalant as far as approaching the elk. It's not as excited, it's not play bowing as much, and I believe that this is an older wolf who has more experience hunting elk and hunting individuals and doesn't want to waste energy pursuing these animals, knowing that the likelihood of making a kill is very low. We aren't 100% certain who exactly these wolves are. There's a lot of theories and rumors going around that they might be the remnants of the Huckleberry Pack, which could absolutely be true. They could also be dispersal wolves from several different packs getting together to form a new group. Perhaps one of them's a female, one of them's a male. they might become the new alphas of a pack. Was still amazing, something I will never forget, and something I don't think my guests will ever forget either. This is one of the reasons why Wyoming and the greater Yellowstone ecosystem is one of the most wild and amazing places to live and to view wildlife. My name is Tyler Greenlee, and I am a wildlife guide at Jackson Hole Ecotour Adventures. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful evening and you enjoyed watching the wolves hunt those elk.
Thanks, Tyler and Laura. Next, let's check in with a carnivore of a different kind. Let's join Verlin and Elise as they go out and look for tracks, most specifically, those from the Weasel family.
Hey there. Out in the backcountry of the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, looking for some track and sign while we have a nice break in the weather here. I'm also looking for some of our favorite animals. Those would be the members of the mustelid family, also known as weasels. Follow me along, we'll see what we can see. So we finally found some tracks, guys. Not quite what we're looking for. You know, we don't have a lot of detail on tracks in the winter with this fluffy light snow. We can't see pads or paws. We can't really see the toes, claws, anything like that. So the first place I like to start is with the track register of the pattern. Right here we've got telltale sign of a coyote. Well, maybe more so a canine. I can assume by size that it's a coyote. However, canines generally leave a 1-1-1 register. It's a trotting gait. They're double registering, stepping twice in the same hole to conserve energy. The animals we're looking for, members of the mustelid family, or our weasels, they're generally going to use a bounding track register, which is simply 2, 2, 2. They're bounding or bouncing across the snow. Here we found a few more tracks. Looks like we got squirrel here. So back to track register and pattern. Squirrels are members of the rodentia family. I mean, they're rodents. Rabbits are lagomorphs. But what they do share in common is a track register or pattern. We're generally going to see 2 little feet with 2 big ones out front, just like we have here. They're always going to be moving in the direction of their big feet, which is their hind feet. So they always plant their little front paws, swing those back legs around, and they're bouncing. And he's going in said direction. Kind of neat, right? Oh, hey, didn't see you there. So, many people are familiar with winter adaptations that include torpor states or hibernation. Like everybody's favorite, bears. Well, at least that's my favorite. I got lots of favorites though. Well, weasels share a few commonalities with bears. One big one that sticks out to me is the fact they have 5 toes. But the big one that often doesn't get talked about is delayed implantation. So both black bears, grizzly bears, and all of our mustelids, or members of the weasel family here, practically called delayed implantation. Basically, their pregnancy cycle for most weasels is roughly 10 months. However, the gestation cycle is right around a month, give or take. You know, different for different members. Well, how does that happen? Basically, the egg is fertilized but doesn't implant in the uterine lining until they're ready to become pregnant. And for some of our weasels, like Martin, those pregnancy cycles are probably starting right about now. After they give birth to their kits, Martin are going to move their kits into subnivean den sites. So the subnivean zone is the area between the snow and the ground where it's insulated. There's a little gap down there. The reason for that, or moving the kits to that subniveal den site, is the fact that they're warm and insulated. Kits are born at just a couple ounces. I should say several ounces. And they've barely haired, blind, and immobile. They don't really have any insulation. So that snow is actually used to insulate them. As they start to grow bigger and closer to being weaned, mom's gonna move them into arboreal den sites, up in old witches' brooms and things, into the trees. So what kind of weasels might we find here in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem? We got quite a few. Well, let's start from big to small. We've got wolverines, badgers, river otters, American marten, mink, long-tailed weasel, short-tailed weasel, and we're in the areas where we could possibly, but be extremely uncommon, even rare, to find American fisher and least weasels, which might be my favorite. Their body's only about the size of a hot dog. Now, wolverine's something I've never seen. Maybe one day I'll get a look. Pretty uncommon here, but they do exist. So here we have another rodent track. This would be a mouse. Now, as to what kind of mouse? Kind of cool. We're gonna have the same track register as we had with our squirrel. Remember, 2 little ones, 2 bigger feet out front. Those would be your hinds. And you just barely see it. We've got a tail drag. This mouse was heading in this direction. So we finally found some marten tracks. Marten are extremely common here. Just kind of surprised we haven't seen more. However, it just finished snowing. If you notice these tracks, we've got a bounding track register pattern. We've got a set of 2, 2, and 2. He's bounding or bouncing across the snow, looking for tasty tidbits, such as rodents. Favorite food is the squirrel. So these squirrels and mice better watch out, because Mr. Marten's looking. So back to our rodent family, these are squirrel tracks, and these are perfect. The squirrel must have just been here. We're only a couple feet from that marten track we just found. We also have some more mouse tracks, but really, really good example of that track register with his front and then his hinds. If you move right up here, we've got an even better mouse track. And here's that track. Perfect tail drag right here. So here we have some American marten scat. Kind of interesting. American martens are categorized as obligatory carnivores. It means they don't necessarily scavenge as much as they like consuming freshly killed prey. What's kind of interesting, think of carnivores only eating meat. We look around through the scat, we've got some berries, maybe even a bud right here. These berries actually look like mountain ash, which is surprising. We've got a lot of hawthorns around here. But anything will do in the depths of winter. If you look really close, you may not be able to see it. We even have quills from some feathers right here. And some little tiny hairs, probably from a small rodent of sorts. So just because he's a carnivore doesn't mean that's the only thing he eats. So we found another weasel track. This would be from an ermine. Now, depending on who you talk to, you get a different answer on what an ermine is. The way I've always gone off of it is that an ermine is any weasel that turns white in the winter. Now correct me if I'm wrong, but that's at least what I've always referred to them as. A lot of species change color in the winter. Seasonal color morphing, we call it. And ermine are one of them. We refer to long-tailed weasels, short-tailed weasels, even least weasels as ermine when they're in their winter color phase, which is white with a little black tip on their tail. These tracks right here are going to be a bounding track register again. We've got doubles, 2 and 2 and 2. He's literally bouncing across the snow. We can tell he's moving this direction because of his handy dandy little tail right here. Now this wouldn't be the entire tail. Their tail's 3-4 inches long at least. But this is just the base of the tail indented in the snow. Now these guys primarily hunt small rodents and voles. Really small things. Even though they are capable of killing things many times their size, they concentrate their efforts most of the year on the smaller mammals. These guys spend a lot of time hunting in what we call the subnivean zone again. Down that little crack, that layer, that weird little micro ecosystem that exists just between the snow and the ground. That's where most of our voles and our smaller rodents are going to spend the winter months. Here we have some unbelievably fresh moose sign. Tracks leading from this way into here. See where this moose bedded for a bit? 2 different areas, maybe 2 moose, maybe 1 moose that got up and laid down another way. If you look really close, kind of cool. Well, maybe not so cool for this moose. But we've got hair all over the place. These are definitely moose hairs. Now, it could be scabies, which is a mite, parasitic mite, causes them to itch and lose their hair. You know, shedding processes are also triggered by photosensitivities or photoperiods, meaning as the days increase in length, the shedding process begins. So this moose could, being very late winter, almost springtime here, be moving into its spring shedding state. Seems a little early, so we'll never know. If we come back right over here, we've got moose poop, also known as dung. You might be able to tell how fresh this is because it's pretty darn cold. If it wasn't fresh, it'd be frozen. Well, pretty frozen, but looks pretty fresh. We'll move on and see if we can find this moose.
Go ahead.
So guys, we just found our moose. Only problem is she's right in the trail we want to take home. So I don't know if you can see her kind of right through there. She's moving, hopefully away from us. We definitely want to keep our distance with moose. It can be extremely dangerous. Not something I'm about to mess around with.
Pretty awesome stuff. A big thanks to Verlin and Elise for taking us out on one of their naturalist adventures. Next, let's continue on this carnivore episode we seem to be having by checking in with perennial fan favorite Laura, who has some really exciting views she got of foxes.
Hey everyone, this is Laura. The winter season gives us a great opportunity to see red foxes in the greater Yellowstone area. Red fox, who are a relatively small mammal at about 10 to 12 pounds, stand up on top of the mid to late winter snowpack and become a lot more visible. Foxes might be out and about on top of our thick snowpack, hunting for rodents. Sometimes we see a fox stop and tilt his head right to left to better hear or triangulate the sound of a rodent down beneath the snow. Then he might dig with his paws, or if he's sure of the location of that rodent using the Earth's magnetic field, he might dive in head first with his tail wagging in the air to tackle or capture a rodent for a meal. And for me, that's one of the most exciting things to see in the greater Yellowstone area, especially if that fox is successful. Fox walk really well on top of our thick snowpack. They've got extra fur between their toes to help support their body weight on top of the snow, almost like they're wearing natural snowshoes. That fur also helps to insulate their paws from the cold. Around here, fox are quite fluffy. They've got really nice big full tails, which they use to curl up in when they bed down for a nap or for the night. Our North American red fox is a species that originated in the Old World over in Europe. We think that our red fox of North America deviated genetically from the European fox about 400,000 years ago. So likely they crossed what was known as the Bering Land Bridge from Siberia over into North America a long time ago, and then have been evolving in isolation from those European foxes ever since. Contrary to their common name, red fox, our local foxes can be born in a variety of colors. Of course, we do have red or light red colored red foxes here, but we also have cross foxes, silver foxes, and the occasional black fox. Cross fox means a cross or combination of red and black coloration. Usually those individuals will have a cross of color right over their shoulder. Occasionally we do see silver or even black colored red foxes. They're still part of the same species, but they have what's called melanism, or too much pigment in their fur, giving them that dark appearance, as black as my jacket. But the silver and black colored foxes that I've seen around here still maintain that little white tip on the end of their tail.
Thanks, Laura. So pretty good stuff, lots of carnivores this evening. Let's go ahead and change over to an animal that sometimes can be a carnivore, but sometimes can be a scavenger, which is the American raven. Let's check in with Josh, who found some really, really interesting stuff going on his last Yellowstone tour and decided to do a little bit more research to find out more.
Despite what birds aren't real might tell you, this is not a government surveillance drone. They're stark raven mad. This is Raven 7485, a GPS-carrying member of the research on ravens and wolves in Yellowstone. Hello everyone, this is naturalist Josh Metton with EcoTour Adventures, and today we're going to learn more about this raven using a cool app you can use to track its movements. Ravens are one of the most common animals we observe in Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Parks. Often overlooked in favor of our charismatic megafauna, ravens are intelligent and beautiful birds that are fun to observe and photograph. Research currently going on in Yellowstone National Park by Matthias Loretto enables us to take a closer look at ravens using the Animal Tracker app. Available for free download, the app features many species of trackable animals. During a recent Winter Wolves and Wildlife of Yellowstone tour, we spotted a raven with leg bands, gray over red on the left and yellow over silver on the right. When I looked up the bands on the Animal Tracker app, 7485 showed up, and we were able to view its movements over the last year. Like most other ravens, 7485 has adapted to take advantage of human food sources, and we can see that the bird spends most of its time in the developed area of Old Faithful. Notice that 7485 also flies outside of the park to West Yellowstone, but really seems to love the Old Faithful area. Raven 7485 matches some of the initial results found in Loretto's research, which show that ravens spend a lot of time feeding on our leftovers. But these highly adaptable birds also have a close relationship with wolves. It's not uncommon to see 30+ ravens arrive at a fresh wolf kill. How do they all find it so quickly? Let's look at another banded raven, 7564. From the gateway towns of West Yellowstone and Gardner to Bozeman and the Lamar Valley, Yellowstone's interior, and even the Madison Valley west of Yellowstone, 7564 covers a lot of ground, presumably finding lots of different things to eat. 7564 is also probably having lots of conversations along the way. Sharing information with other birds may mean you get to hear about otherwise unknown food sources, which helps explain the large number of ravens at wolf kills. You might even say 7564 has been out making lots of caws. What we still don't know is how ravens find wolf kills so quickly. Are they closely following wolf packs? From field observations, this does appear to be the case, but comparing GPS points from collared wolves and collared ravens could help us better understand how close of a relationship they really have. For now, the study has shown that ravens move a lot more than we originally thought, and that they take advantage of our messes, while also using the diverse food sources available across the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Want to learn more and help out with the study? Download the Animal Tracker app and look for the common ravens and gray wolves, a special relationship, point of interest in Yellowstone. From EcoTour Adventures, this is naturalist Josh Metton. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, Josh. All right, to continue on in our grand carnivore tradition tonight, Kelsey has been looking into the history of some of our most famous wolves, including one of the wolves that made one of the greatest impacts on my life and decision to pursue wildlife biology. 253M has had enormous impact on lots of different people. Let's learn a little bit more about this famous wolf, as well as the wolf Kelsey saw on the refuge this last month that reminded her of him.
Hey guys, it's Kelsey with Jackson Hole Eco Tour Adventures, and today I want to share with you a video that I managed to take of a wolf in Grand Teton National Park. Now, as you can see in this video, this wolf has a pretty bad limp. And while we don't know what caused the injury on this wolf, this does remind me of a story of one of the more famous wolves in Yellowstone National Park, a wolf by the name of 253, also known as Limpy, because he had a pretty significant limp. Now, Limpy was born in 2000 into the Druid Peak Pack, and that pack is still holds the record for the largest pack ever to exist within Yellowstone National Park since the reintroduction. At their height in 2001, they actually had 37 wolves, and Limpy was part of them, part of the pack at that time. Now, the reason Limpy got his name is because when he was a little bit less than 2 years old, he got into a skirmish with another wolf pack over, it was a territory dispute, and he suffered a pretty significant injury to his left hind leg that left him with a permanent limp for the rest of his life. But that didn't deter him whatsoever. When he turned 2, he actually left his home pack, which is typical of wolves around that age, and traveled outside Yellowstone National Park. This made him the first reported wolf in the state of Utah in 70 years. And the trapper who caught him called a biologist, and that biologist rescued Limpy from the trap and brought him back up to Wyoming and released him back just outside of Yellowstone. And Limpy then made the long journey through many different wolf pack territories to get back to the Druid Peak Pack, where he actually hung out for another 2 years. He became such a prominent wolf in the pack that he was actually considered basically second ranking to his the wolf that was believed to be his father, Wolf 21M, the alpha of the Druid Peak Pack, and who is famous in his own right, and that's a story for another time. But when in the summer of 2004, 21 died, and it kind of seemed like Limpy would take over that pack, but he actually was usurped by a wolf that was known as New Black, and after New Black took over, 253 left his pack and began wandering around Yellowstone, eventually showing up about 90 miles south of his birthplace in the National Elk Refuge here in Jackson Hole. In early 2005, a few months later, it's believed that Limpy actually fathered his only offspring because he was seen with another male and a female and 5 pups. So that pack in the refuge became known as the Flat Creek Pack, but within a year, actually, 253, or Limpy, wandered south again, and that pack was dissolved. And we don't know why that is, but this is when Limpy started to gain the title of the Wanderer as well. On March 28th, 2008, the federal government lifted the status of the gray wolf as endangered in the United States. And that same day, Limpy was shot. And so when ranchers finally received the go-ahead to shoot wolves, Limpy was one of the first victims of that. But he lived for about 8 years and covered hundreds of miles in his life, all with a very severe limp. So he's a pretty impressive wolf, to say the least.
Thanks, Kelsey. Definitely worth researching a little bit more about Wolf 253, as well as some of the other really famous Yellowstone wolves that we've had throughout the year. Or throughout the years. You can go on a tour and we can tell you lots of stories about all of these great wolves. I hope y'all don't mind all the wolf footage this month. January, February is traditionally wolf breeding season and is one of the easiest times of year to see them. And boy, have we had an amazing breeding season this year, particularly when it comes to our multi-days up in Yellowstone National Park, as well as just our day trips down here in Grand Teton. Great sightings, just tons and tons of views of wolves this year. And I could not be happier about all the opportunities we had and so much snow on top of it. So let's change gears a little bit. Let's go back to the National Elk Refuge to talk about bighorn sheep. But don't worry, we're going to sneak some carnivores in here too. Let's check in with Sarah.
Hello, this is Guide Sarah Ernst, and I'm currently here in my driveway, which as you can see has a heck of a lot of snow. The long-legged moose can cope with such deep snow, but most of the other hoofed animals, they have to get the heck out of here in the wintertime. And they will be migrating down to areas that are a bit less snow, maybe because they're windswept, or south-facing slopes where the sun is melting the snow. One of the animals that's always a highlight of any of our winter wildlife watching trips for both the guides and our visitors are the bighorn sheep. Bighorn sheep have been migrating from the high elevation lands around Jackson Hole to the low-lying buttes in the southern end of the valley for hundreds, if not many thousands of years. This is based on archaeological evidence from the Tukadika, or the mountain sheep-eater people. To this day, there are hunting blinds, sheep traps, and teepee rings found in many locations around the historic wintering grounds of the bighorn sheep. Sadly, due to disease and habitat loss, Jackson Hole's bighorn sheep herds have shrunk in population over the years, and this continues to be a threat to the herd today. But considering many other ski resort towns have lost their bighorn sheep altogether, we are really blessed to have a large herd of bighorn sheep right on the edge of town on National Elk Refuge. Bighorn sheep usually arrive on the Elk Refuge during the first half of the breeding season, which peaks from November to December. Most of the fighting we see occurs pretty early on as the males establish their pecking order for the season, but we will still continue to see some conflicts through early January and even later on in the winter as the young males practice. It's always exciting to view the rut of any of our large animals, but there is something special about the bighorn sheep. Maybe because we know it's the last of the season. At just 6 months, bighorns have a shorter gestation period than our other hoofed animals. Or maybe it's the drama. There are long moments of quiet tension as the sheep engage in their highly ritualized preparation for contact, followed by the shockingly loud, violent moment of impact. The males are literal battering rams as they work out the pecking order. The most powerful and dominant males do most of the breeding while the young males try to sneak around behind the backs of the exhausted big males. Imagine the force generated as the rams smack their 30-pound heads at one another at 20 miles per hour. If we humans were to hit the ground head first from a motorcycle at such a speed, without a helmet, we'd be lucky to get away with just a concussion. Yet bighorn do this over and over again for weeks, and while we can't ask them if they suffer headaches from it, they rarely seem to show any ill effects. Bighorn sheep have built-in helmets on their skulls, thick, shock-absorbing skulls, and keratin horn sheaths that absorb some of the blow. Mechanisms that slow down blood flow through the chambers around their skull help cushion the brain, like bubble wrap cushions a delicate package. Still, bighorn have to hit each other at a precise angle to minimize the damage. You'd think that a male would want to injure or kill his opponent. After all, it would be one less potential suitor for the females to choose from. But a fight that could injure your opponent could also injure you, even if you were the victor. And an injured opponent could lure in predators that could then threaten you or your offspring. And that brings us to a cool moment that we had this week on one of my wildlife and snowshoe combo tours. We began at the National Elk Refuge watching some distant cow elk before moving on to some bighorns that had descended to the bottom of the cliffs for breakfast. Some of my guests might wonder why I'm always scanning the hills for animals a mile away when we had this perfectly good herd of bighorn sheep just 30 yards away from our touring vehicle. And most of the time I have to admit that there's nothing out there at all, but it's always worth searching. And this day, oh boy, were we rewarded for our patience. With my Maven-built binoculars, I noticed a silhouette on the edge of the cliff that looked a little funky. There was a shape of a horn, but it was a weird angle on the ground, and above it there was a small face, topped by a pair of very large ears, too large for a sheep. I put a spotting scope on it to get a closer look, and turned out to be this pair of coyotes feeding on a young male bighorn wedged right into the cliff. What was unusual about this event was the timing and the age of the sheep. Like most ungulates, bighorn sheep are at their most hardy at the beginning of winter, when they still have plenty of body fat reserves. We tend to see more carcasses in the second half of winter, as the animals are progressively weakened by poor forage and winter conditions. And this was a young male, so I should have been in pretty good health. Coyotes aren't major predators of adult bighorn sheep, although they do sometimes take lambs in the spring, if they can catch them. The size of a bighorn, 100 to 300 pounds, is pretty tough for a pair of 30-pound coyotes to take down. Though he's closer in size to a female than a big mature ram, something would have still had to trip the odds for the coyotes to be able to catch the sheep. Plus, bighorns can elude most predators on the cliffs with their rubbery hooves. That's why we seldom see bighorns away from the nearby cliffs. Looking at the way this sheep was wedged into the cliff, we can only speculate what happened. Did he fall to his death from up above? Did he get stuck and then fall prey to the coyotes? Or suffer an injury that made him easier to catch? Or did he just happen to die there on his own from disease or maybe after being hit by a car? We just couldn't tell from our parking spot, but it sure was an interesting mystery. Regardless of whether they found or killed the sheep, a coyote never knows when its next meal is coming from. Coyotes get most of their winter diet here in the Elk Refuge from rodents and scavenging, both of which are unreliable food sources. So these coyotes wolfed down their meal as fast as they could. A coyote's stomach can easily hold 5 pounds of meat or more. In proportion to their size, that's like a 150-pound human consuming an entire 25-pound turkey for Thanksgiving. Though a canine's digestive system can handle a meal that size better than we could, I can't help but think that the post-meal nap these two coyotes did felt really good.
Thanks, Sarah. All right, so we've got one last thing for you, this one last video for you this month, and then we'll be doing our trivia question for your chance to win, and I'll be answering your questions live. So if you've got a question, now's a great time for you to go ahead and put those out in the comment section. As you can see, I was definitely reviewing some of them. Don, we'll get to yours in just a minute. It's so wonderful to see so many great familiar faces and friendly faces from months in the past who are coming to join us. So we really do appreciate everybody tuning in live. Our very own Josh Metton, who you may know as our naturalist and social media manager, has been working very hard over the last few months to put together a film with Origin Media. It's called Denizens of the Steppe, and I wanted to give you guys a chance to check out the trailer. It's really an important film about the bighorn sheep herd in the Teton Range. We just saw the bighorns in the Grovant Range. These are the Teton Range on the other end of the valley, and the conflict that they face with backcountry skiers and how to find balance between the needs of people and the needs of wildlife. Let's check in, because I think you guys will really enjoy this trailer. And Maddie, who's in our comment section this week, will definitely go ahead and link to the film as well. It's about 10 minutes long.
You know, as a person looking up at the Teton Range in the wintertime, who would think that there's, 100 or so animals eking it out up there?
I think as humans, we're walking a fine line. If more people are going to go into the wilderness and we want it to stay pristine, we need to be very aware of our environment.
You know, the fact is we're viewed as a predator whether or not we want to be.
We don't just want to be a user of the backcountry, but a steward, so this place exists, including all the animals.
Pretty pretty cool stuff. Definitely check out the link in the comment section to watch the full film. I'm so proud, we all are so proud of Josh and Origin Media. This is definitely a really important film. If you care about Bighorn Sheep, you like backcountry skiing, definitely worth 10 minutes of your time. And we look forward to all the awards it's going to win on the film festival circuit. All right, it's time for my second favorite part of every broadcast, which is our trivia question of the week. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll start with last month's trivia question, get you guys an answer, and then we'll go ahead and we'll do this month's trivia question for a chance to win. Our trivia questions this month are sponsored by one of our items in our Jackson Hole Eco Tour Adventures online store. For those of you guys who are not familiar with that, we started it during the first outbreak of COVID just about a year ago now, as a way to go ahead and pay for benefits for our guides like health insurance. So if you'd like to support the guides who you've seen on this broadcast, support their work, please definitely go check out some of the goods on our store. The sponsored item this month, we're super excited that we got some copies of the much anticipated, eagerly awaited Yellowstone Wolves from Doug Smith. This book has been, 40 years in the making, from the expert and from the man himself who introduced these wolves and monitored them throughout his career in Yellowstone National Park, and in his retirement wrote such an amazing book. I'm only about halfway through, and I have to tell you, I'm learning all sorts of things I didn't know. So if you have a passion for wolves, definitely check that out. We're so excited we could get some copies because it's been a big seller, and I definitely think you guys will enjoy that particular item in the store. If you just enjoy seeing these videos every month and you want to support our guides, you can always leave us a tip. $5 definitely is going to go a pretty long way towards the production of this program, but more importantly towards making sure that the guides get what they need in terms of health insurance and other benefits. So we definitely will support their health insurance. We'll definitely support their full retirement benefits, all of those things, regardless of whether this series is produced or not. But we do want to give you guys the opportunity, because folks have asked in the past, to support these guys. And we assure you that all of the proceeds of all of our online store go to our employees. All right. Ready for the trivia question from last month? Did you get it right last month? Let's review. Go ahead and answer in the comment section if you want, if you know the answer. But I will tell you, we've already given out the winning prize for last month's trivia. If you comment on this month's trivia, that's how you're going to win. So let's start with last month's. All right, this comes to our naturalist, Tyler Greenlee, the one you saw in the first video talking about wolves. He says, the Grizzly Bear 168 has outlived all the females documented within the greater Yellowstone ecosystem by 4 years, which is bizarre because females are commonly thought to have lived longer than males. And the bear was originally captured and tattooed with the number 168 on its lip. You can just barely see above that tooth there, that upper tooth, you can see maybe what was the remains of a tattoo. Sadly, this bear was in very poor shape last summer and was actually killing cattle by gumming them to death, as it only had 3 remaining teeth and it was in very poor weight. And so Wyoming Game and Fish did make a decision that because this animal was killing cattle, because it couldn't get natural prey, and that it was in very, very poor shape and was suffering, it was euthanized. But when they went ahead and they looked at when that animal had received that lip tattoo, they got a big surprise, which is it's absolutely the oldest recorded bear in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. My question last month was, how old was Bear 168? Was the bear, it's not popping up, that's all right, A, 27 years old, B, 31 years old, C, 34 years old, or D, 46 years old? So go ahead and put in the comment section if you think you know the answer. But I'll go ahead and I'll give you a hint. Grizzly Bear 399 is in her mid-20s, and she's about as old as we commonly would see a bear get. So anything older than that would be a pretty big deal. The answer is that the bear was 34 years old. Now, I personally have never seen a bear who's 34. That is incredible and really, really amazing. It took everybody by surprise. Bears, of course, are numbered in order of the research done. And if Grizzly Bear 399 was the 399th research subject, you can imagine how far back you'd have to go to get to the 168th research subject. In fact, you'd have to go 34 years ago. So pretty amazing stuff. Too bad that the bear had to be euthanized, but definitely some pretty fascinating trivia for sure. All right. Now we've got this month's trivia question. This is how you're going to win it, guys. You can get a $10 gift card to our EcoTour store by just commenting the correct answer in the comment section. And then our trivia master, Elise, will go ahead and take a look in about a week. So if you're not watching this as live, it's okay. You have a whole week to answer. They're going to go ahead and take a look at all of the correct answers, and they'll randomly choose one of them to win the gift card. If you are watching this from another group's page or from a friend's page, you do have to go to the EcoTour Adventure original video comment section to get a chance to win. Otherwise, we're not going to see your comments. So definitely tell us on the comment section on our page, not necessarily somebody else's page, just in case. Okay, here is the question. It's very simple. What species is this bird? Now, this is an animal that was recently considered for the endangered species list, and a large cooperation between states and the federal government have delayed the listing so that this bird is actually being protected not by federal agencies, but by state governments, and the result has been somewhat successful. The first of its kind, I might add, the ability to delay an animal's listing through cooperation of the states with each other and the federal government. So go ahead and tell me in the comment section, what is the name of that bird? What kind of bird is that? And if you get the answer right, then we'll go ahead and we'll get you entered for a chance to win that gift card. Okay, super duper fun. Now it's time for my very favorite part, which is I'm here to answer your questions live. So the way this is going to work is I've got my iPad here, and I'm going to be looking down. So if you're wondering what the heck I'm doing, at your questions, and I'll see how many of them I can get to. I'm going to start all the way at the top, people who ask questions first come, first serve, and we'll kind of make our way down. Everybody ready? All right, let's see here. Jean asks, is it true that wolves can overcome mange? Does it matter with the size of the pack? That's a really, really good question. And there's a lot of debate that's been done back and forth. There's a lot of research that's been done on this. I'm assuming in this case we're talking about sarcoptic mange, which is the most common mange that we see in mammals. And it is quite devastating to wolf packs. It can cause them to lose their fur, uncomfortable itching and scratching. And unfortunately, if they don't have the fur that they need to survive the winter, the cold temperatures can be quite deadly through frostbite and hypothermia. There is a story that is unconfirmed and has never been substantiated, but the idea was that maybe there wasn't any mange in the western United States, that it was actually brought here on purpose as a wolf extermination tool. They had it pretty rampantly on the eastern seaboard. A cattlemen's association out west actually got a mangy dog on a train, paid to have it shipped across the country. I believe this was in Montana. And then they captured a wolf, and they had the dog and the wolf live side by side in cages for several days, and then released the wolf, and we've had mange in the western United States ever since. Now, as I said, this story is unsubstantiated. How would you prove such a thing? Mange could have naturally come westward with settlers and settlers' dogs, right? It's not necessarily something that was on purpose, but I do still find it an interesting story. In that wolves were considered, enemy number one for a long time until they were expatriated in the continental United States. Then, of course, were reintroduced into Yellowstone. When they were reintroduced, of course, they did get mange. All sorts of animals continue to carry mange. They probably got it from coyotes, but certainly could get it from domestic dogs as well. Mange can be treated, but it requires repeated medicating. Something that you're not going to be able to do with a wild wolf. Wolves can overcome mange, but there's kind of two ways they overcome it. The first way, and probably the most common and probably the likely way that we're seeing it, is that their immune system can fight it back for a time, but it does resurge on occasion. The second way is there are some theories that they can overcome it entirely. Dogs can naturally on their own overcome it entirely, but it's pretty difficult. Most of them will continue to suffer with it unless they're treated. So we do have mange outbreaks in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem in our wolf population. about every 2 to 3 years, and it's particularly deadly for pups. Wolf pups don't do well with it. But if you ever see a coyote or a wolf or even a fox out on the range who doesn't have any hair left on his tail, it's a pretty good sign that that's sarcoptic mange. So great question there. Let's see here. Did elk keep their antlers longer in the winter before 1995, before wolves were reintroduced? So no, they did not. So when we say evolutionarily that, or Tyler said, elk may have developed as a species that they keep their antlers longer, it's in referral to other species of deer. So white-tailed deer, for instance, are going to shed their antlers sooner than elk will. In the same way that moose will shed their antlers sooner than elk will, because wolves and elk are dynamically interlocked with each other, which is to say they co-evolved. Wolves evolved to hunt elk. That's their main food source. And elk, of course, have evolved many, many strategies to avoid being hunted by wolves, including having a very high reproductive rate to compensate, but also being great strategies to keep them from being hunted, including speed, endurance, and the ability to fight back and kick, for sure. One of my favorite strategies is that they actually just walk into a river when wolves are after them, and wolves don't really want to swim and try to hunt and kill something at the same time, so they oftentimes will succeed. The other thing that sometimes elk will do that's very successful is there's studies that show that if elk stand their ground and they don't run away, almost always they succeed, and that wolves will actually give up. So when you saw that video earlier with Tyler and those elk standing their ground, it's a pretty good sign when you're watching that the wolves probably aren't going to be able to take down their prey. Always an occasional exception. Wolves love to break rules, but generally speaking, I find it pretty interesting that elk who don't run away are the ones who are the most successful. Great question there. Don asks, what are the odds of a bison giving birth to 2 calves? Don, I do see it. It does happen. And we don't have an official rate for it. I'm going to confess that my knowledge of this is, oh gosh, I see 2 or 3 cases a year in Grand Teton, right? So out of a herd of 600 to 800 animals, I see a couple cases of it. That's not very scientific. So I actually did Google this while we had some of those videos running, just to see if there was a better answer. And the short version is the Albertan Bison Association doesn't have better numbers, nor does the North American Bison Growers Association, people who raise bison domestically. It's rare. It's unusual. About as rare, I suppose, as I sort of have stated. The problem is that generally speaking, I find that those calves are smaller. They're born smaller, they grow slower, and they're more vulnerable to predation. When you see orphaned calves out in the wild, there is a good chance that those were the results of twins. That's one of the main reasons that calves can become orphaned. So not necessarily in bison's best interest, but just like any other mammal, twins are certainly possible. I've never heard of a case of triplets. My concern there is it would be probably pretty harmful for the mother in terms of the birth process. When you see triplets in cattle, for instance, it's very common for those calves to become lodged and to need human assistance to get out, particularly if they're breech. And so for a bison in the wild, that could be potentially deadly. So great question. Let's see what else we've got here. Lots of right answers on our trivia questions. Sheesh, you guys, I can't ever put one past you. What else we got here? Bear with me here while I'm reading. I know it's very exciting. Do wolves ever go into water? Of course they do, and they're quite good swimmers, about as good as you'd see a dog swimming. In fact, the Lamar Valley pack, which has come up, the Lamar Valley packs over the years, there's been several different packs, but very famously, they like to den on one side of the Lamar River, almost every pack that's lived in that valley, and then they usually have to hunt on the other side of the river, and they have to get across the river, either on a daily basis, or more importantly, when it comes to their pups, when they transition their pups from the den to a rendezvous site when they're quite young. And it can be actually a very, very swift river in the spring, very deadly to young wolf pups who don't know what they're doing. And every single year, river, several wolf pups are actually lost in that crossing. It's a sort of notorious problem of the Lamar Valley that they've got to get back and forth across that river. But generally speaking, yes, wolves are very good swimmers, but it's very, very hard to stay afloat and try to kill something in the water, which is to say, if an elk is standing in the water and they're standing their ground and you have to swim out to get them, how are you going to latch onto them and hold on without getting water pouring down your throat and your nose and your eyes? And then of course you have to stop swimming, right? So it's actually really difficult to kill things when you're actually engaged in swimming. It's a very clever technique that elk know to go for the water, and it's a very successful technique as a result of that. What's interesting is elk started doing that immediately as soon as wolves were introduced, and so it's an inborn instinctual knowledge that they know that water is safe and they'll always run for the water. In Grand Teton National Park, we actually will see that boundary lines oftentimes border large bodies of water. And it can be really interesting because sometimes one pack will chase an elk and it'll get across the river and then it'll die from its wounds on the other side of the river. And of course, the pack that lives on the other side of the river thinks, well, this is great, right? Free meal. But the first pack goes, well, wait a minute, we went to all the trouble, and it can actually create some conflict between two packs, sort of who does that elk belong to? The fact that the elk got into the other territory, does it make it theirs, or does it make it the ownership of the wolves who actually put the wounds in that caused it to expire? So not to get too morbid, I mean, you know, that's what wolves do. They kill elk. So we try to keep it honest here. The reality is what they are, right? There's good things and bad things about any animal. There's good things and bad things about grizzly bears and wolves and elk and moose. There's good things and bad things about people, right? So the reality is that they do kill elk. That is an important part of their diet. They don't kill too many elk. Our elk are in surplus. We've had a surplus of elk since wolves were reintroduced in the western United States. But they certainly do force elk to move around, to disperse, and not to overeat the land. So great question there. Let's see here. Bill, you're going to get me into controversial stuff here. But Bill asks, how do we convince our human friends that feeding bears is not helping bears? Really, really good question. And there's been a lot of controversy lately about wildlife feeding, both here in Teton County and some other places. And there's just a long, long, long history of this. It always kinds of ends the same way, which is to say, first of all, a fed bear is a dead bear. Bears who get human food or are fed by people become habituated to that human food and eventually become aggressive to that human food. And usually are put down and euthanized. And we know this because we have a long, long history of this in this country, both with grizzly bears and black bears. We even have history of it with polar bears. The problem is that people who firmly believe that they're providing a benefit to any fed wildlife are very, very hard to dissuade one way or another. It's not good to feed bears, but it's also not good to feed moose or elk or deer or bison or wolves or bighorn sheep or coyotes. None of these animals should be fed by people. And there's a variety of reasons it's a bad idea. When we go to the ungulate family, the hoofed mammal family, things like deer and elk, the reason it's a problem is because their bacteria in their four-chambered stomach, particularly in their rumen, are adapted towards winter forage. And when you feed them something that's not their typical winter forage, and winter forage tends to have a low caloric content, typically is very dense and woody and difficult to digest, and that bacteria is critical for breaking that food down and finding nutrients. If all of a sudden you flood their guts with sweet, nutritious, easy to digest food, then you're going to create an unbalancing of bacteria, an overgrowth of bacteria. Now, anybody in their lives who've ever had an overgrowth of bacteria, aka food poisoning, knows how uncomfortable that is. So first and foremost, you're giving them a tummy ache and making them pretty miserable. But then, once that other type of bacteria comes in that only is good at breaking down, say, apples or molasses-enriched grain or just grain in general, then when they try to go back to their native forage, they can actually lose weight or even starve because they don't have the resources they need to break down their natural food sources. Now, some feeders will say, well, I'll just keep feeding them. That's all well and good, but bringing them into contact and into areas with people is introducing all sorts of risks. It's introducing zoonotic disease between humans and animals. We give lots of diseases to animals, and we can be quite harmful to them. It's introducing human interaction, which is to say things like domestic dogs or cars or all of these other things that are conflicting with their lifestyle. When animals get hit by cars in neighborhoods, it's because they were brought into those neighborhoods because those neighborhoods provided something for them. Oftentimes a food source of one variety or the other. It could just be ornamental shrubs, or it could be something that somebody's actively feeding. If that animal then gets hit by a car, they wouldn't have been in the neighborhood if they weren't getting some kind of a food, right? And then the worst problem that we sometimes see is if you're feeding elk or you're feeding deer, then those can bring their predators into those areas. It's a pretty common problem in the Western United States. People will feed deer, that will bring in mountain lions. People get scared of mountain lions in the neighborhood, mountain lion gets euthanized. Well, that's not the mountain lion's fault, it was following the deer. The deer went from a wild area to a neighborhood. The mountain lion who needs to eat the deer follows, and unfortunately that results in the death of the mountain lion. In the case of a bear, it gets even more complicated. Human food, or even food that's not part of their natural food, is incredibly addictive to bears. And I don't want to get too nerdy on this because we could go on and there's no point in doing that. But the short version is we like certain types of energy. So humans and mammals and animals with similar digestions like bears really love quick, easy to use energy. And that's because evolutionarily, that's the easiest thing for us to process. So sugars and carbohydrates are far, far more preferable to, say, protein, right? So the reason that I am this proportion is because I love sugar. The reason I love sugar is because sugar triggers hormonal responses in my brain to make me crave it and enjoy it. And the reason is because it's a really easy, quick source of energy. So if you go back to when humans were hunter-gatherer peoples, and we roamed the landscape looking for food, if there was an opportunity to get sugar, a quick, easy source of energy that would be well used by our metabolism, we needed a way evolutionarily for our bodies to encourage us to go ahead and get those berries versus, say, the grasses. And by creating this craving response, by creating this sugar high, by creating a pleasurable experience of eating sugar, it made sure that we would seek out sugar when we had the opportunity. Then, of course, we became agrarian. We started growing crops. We started planting crops, primarily carbohydrates. And that evolutionary instinct, once we started getting lots and lots of sugars and carbohydrates, actually turned itself off. It didn't get any more vivid. So in other words, I like sugar because my ancestors needed to make sure they could take use of sugar on the land. But that liking of sugar hits a certain point and turns off. A grizzly bear is nothing more, when you think about it, than a hunter-gatherer. That's what they do. They hunt and gather on the land. Only that instinctual response to crave things like sugar and carbohydrates never turned off. It continued to evolve and get stronger. So when I eat sugar, I get a pleasurable response and a sugar high, right? Just ask my nephews. But when a bear eats sugar, it's a whole nother level of satisfaction. Pretty similar to pretty strong drugs, particularly opioids, are probably triggering the same areas of the brain that bears are, when they're eating sugar, are getting the same response. So you feed a bear once, and it's incredibly addictive. They want that sugar high again, that intense sugar high, far more sugar high than we would get. And they're always going to come back to that area to continue to get those rewards. And if they don't get those rewards, then they're going to become aggressive to get those rewards because they have to have that high again. If you think about it like you're feeding a bunch of bears illegal drugs, that's not true, but it makes a little bit more sense. And it's a great way to sort of explain it to people that really think they're helping bears out. It's no wonder that bears are going to return to somebody who's feeding them over and over again. But we know from places like Tahoe and some of these other areas where people just would not stop feeding bears. And it resulted in bear and human mortalities and a lot of hardship on all sides, that it always ends badly. And that's why we tend to have laws and rules that prohibit the feeding of all wildlife, but in particular bears. Hopefully that makes a little bit more sense. It's kind of a long explanation, but hopefully kind of cleared it up. All right, let's see here. By the way, the best thing I can think of we can do is knowledge and education and understanding consequences are the key to solving most of the world's problems. And unfortunately, if you don't know that you're causing harm, you're not going to stop, right? All right, perfect. Let's see what else we got here. I don't hear your cat. Is she still with you? Yes, Orca, last I checked on her, she was asleep. I'm too boring. She used to get really excited, I think, about these Wildlife Wednesday broadcasts and then decided that they were boring and she didn't need to entertain us. So sadly, she's not around, but she's doing well. She's thriving. She's great. My almost 2-year-old daughter and her are the best of buddies. I never thought that my daughter and my cat would be best friends. That's sort of a strange thing, but they definitely are. So thanks for asking after her. Let's see here. Mark asks, are foxes and coyotes at safe levels in Jackson Hole and Yellowstone? Mark, that's kind of an interesting question, and I'm not exactly sure what you mean by safe levels. Is safe to people? Foxes and coyotes typically don't attack people. It's possible. Once again, a fed coyote in places like Los Angeles might bite the hand that feeds it after a while, right? But coyote attacks, fox attacks on people are incredibly rare, not something you need to be concerned about when traveling around in the national parks. As for safe levels, maybe you mean, are they at reasonable levels, correct levels, balanced levels for the ecosystem? And the short answer is probably. Part of the problem is when we expatriated wolves and we made them extinct in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, our coyote population surged to go ahead and fill that ecological niche that wolves were using. It was of great benefit to them. But coyotes will kill foxes, and so our fox population actually declined. When we reintroduced wolves in 1995, one of the things that happened is immediately our coyote population plunged and our fox population stabilized. We get back to the idea of what's the proper number of all of these animals. And the answer is, if these animals are able to do well, we don't see starvation, we don't see them doing poorly, they're able to make a living off the land, so to speak, then we're probably doing okay in that we don't have too many. But in terms of too few, it's hard to know how many were originally in Grand Teton and Yellowstone. This is also a problem we have with beavers that were almost hunted to extinction. Now, as we bring beavers back, we don't really know what the proper number of beavers to have is and how many beavers is the right number of beavers. So one of the jobs of a wildlife biologist is to try and do what's in the best interest of the full ecosystem. And sometimes that means encouraging the population growth of one species and discouraging or eliminating the growth of a population of another species. In this particular case, there's no question that wolf populations are probably lower than they would be naturally. Coyote populations are probably a little higher than they would be naturally. And fox populations are recovering, but it's hard to say how many foxes we should have. Hopefully that answers your question. Let's see here. If I hike Blacktail Butte in mid-June, would I encounter a moose or a bison? Maybe. They both could certainly be present on that butte in Grand Teton National Park. That's definitely something, definitely see a lot of moose and a lot of bison there all the time in June. So certainly a possibility. Definitely pay attention, right? And make sure you got your knowledge of your surroundings. And, you know, they're pretty big animals, so hopefully, unless you're in the super deep woods, you'd have a chance to see them first. Although sometimes they surprise me how quiet they can be. All right, awesome. Let's see here. Natalie asks, when do bears in the area generally end their hibernation? Natalie, it varies by the species and the gender and whether or not they have cubs. So grizzlies come out first, typically male grizzlies. In the end of March, we can begin to see some grizzlies emerging from torpor, followed by male and female bears without cubs and who were not pregnant, followed by females who were pregnant and females with cubs who come out last. It's kind of a cycle that takes place over about a 2-month period. Grizzlies emerge sooner than black bears emerge. But it's kind of a staggered thing. You know, one group comes out than another. If the winter has been mild, bears will emerge sooner. If the winter has been more severe and it's going to be difficult to find food, then they're going to emerge a little bit later. So pretty soon we're going to probably start to see some bears on the landscape. All right. I think I got everything. everybody's questions. Guys, if I didn't get your question, I will definitely go check in the comment section. If you're seeing this sometime in the next week or month, we'll definitely make sure we get to your questions as well. We'll definitely answer here in the comment section, but you can always send us a DM. We're happy to answer any old questions. Definitely feel free to stump us. It is always such a pleasure to spend the first Wednesday of every month with you all. I am so flattered that you all continue to want to spend every month with us and you enjoy these great videos from Jackson Hole. We hope to see all of you in person one day. Feel free to come out on one of our tours, but in the meantime, I hope you had a great couch vacation. Have a wonderful week, a wild weekend, and we'll see you next month. Bye-bye.